All right, today we're cracking open the Consultant's Toolkit. We're going to look at 7 powerful frameworks for tackling those big, messy, ambiguous problems. The ones you can't just solve with a simple spreadsheet. This is all about a system for turning total chaos into strategic clarity. So let's dive in. So, picture this. You've just come out of a fantastic brainstorming session. The energy's high, the whiteboard is absolutely covered in ideas, you've got sticky notes everywhere. But then, that feeling sets in. What do we actually do with all this stuff? How in the world do you sort through 100 different ideas and opinions without just getting completely lost? Well, the answer is not to guess, and it's definitely not about just picking the idea from the loudest person in the room. The best leaders, the best consultants, they rely on a structured approach. They have a system designed for exactly this kind of qualitative data. The ideas, the opinions, the feedback, all that stuff that's so important but so hard to quantify. And today, we're going to pull that system apart. So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about what this secret weapon actually is. Then we'll walk through 3 core modules. Module 1 is all about how to structure those raw ideas. Module 2, how to map the hidden connections between them. And Module 3, how to build a solid plan for success. And then we'll put it all together. So what is this big secret weapon? Well, it's a set of frameworks called the 7 Management and Planning Tools, or just 7M for short. Now, these actually came out of Japan's total quality management movement back in the 70s. They were specifically designed to bring that same level of analytical rigor to words and ideas that was already being used for, say, numbers on a factory floor. And this, right here, is the absolute key difference. You see, a lot of people have heard of the 7 basic quality control tools, things like histograms and control charts, and those are fantastic for analyzing quantitative data, hard numbers. But the 7M tools, they were built for a different world. They were built for the messy, ambiguous world of qualitative data, opinions, ideas, strategies. They're not for counting defects. They're for creating clarity and building bulletproof plans. Okay, let's open the first tray in our toolkit, structuring ideas. This is your go-to when you're standing in front of that whiteboard full of sticky notes. These first 2 tools are all about creating some order from that initial brainstorming chaos. First up, we've got the affinity diagram. It's also known as the KJ method. Now, think of this as your strategic chaos sorter. It's the perfect tool when you're facing a really unfamiliar problem and you just have a massive amount of unstructured ideas. The real power here is in its simplicity. You don't need any prior knowledge, so a team can just jump right in and start finding those hidden patterns. Now, the process seems really simple, but there's a reason for every step. First, everyone on the team writes down their ideas silently and on their own. This is so important. It gets rid of that loudest voice in the room problem, and it stops groupthink dead in its tracks. Next, the team starts sorting all those ideas into groups that just feel like they belong together. Then you give each of those groups a sharp, meaningful name. And finally, and this is the part that makes it all worthwhile, you use those new groups as the building blocks for a real, concrete action plan. Okay, so once you have those big picture themes from your affinity diagram, you're probably going to need to dig a little deeper, right? And that's where the tree diagram comes in. This tool is all about systematically breaking down a big concept into its smaller, more manageable parts. You start with a goal, and you map out all the different ways to get there. The way it works is you're basically interrogating your own goal. You put your main objective on the far left of the page. Then you ask a simple but powerful question. Either how can we do this if you're planning, or why does this happen if you're trying to find a root cause? Every single answer becomes a new branch on the tree. You just keep repeating that process, layer by layer, until that huge, complex problem has been broken down into small, actionable pieces. All right, so we've structured our ideas, we've got them in some kind of order. Now we can move on to Module 2. We need to figure out how all these ideas actually connect and influence each other. This is where we stop just making lists and we start to really understand the system we're dealing with. The first tool we'll use for that is the interrelationship diagraph. And with this, we're graduating from simple lists to a full-blown system map. This is the tool you grab when you have a super complex problem, where all the causes and effects are tangled up in a web. It's designed to take those themes you found in the affinity diagram and show you what's really driving the problem and what the ultimate outcomes are. So here's how you do it. You take your key factors and just arrange them in a big circle. Then, one by one, you look at a factor and ask, does this one influence any of the others? If the answer is yes, you draw an arrow from the cause to the effect. You do that for every single factor. And once you're done, you just count the arrows. And this is where the magic happens. It's so simple, but so powerful. The factors that have the most arrows going out of them, those are your primary drivers, your root causes. That's where you need to focus your effort. And the factors with the most arrows coming in, those are your key outcomes, the end results. In just one diagram, you've pinpointed the most powerful levers for change. Next up is the matrix diagram. This is a fantastic way to prioritize things by showing how strong the relationships are between two different sets of information. So for example, on one side, you could list all the things your customers care about, like fast delivery or product quality. And on the other side, you list your internal processes, like inventory management or QA testing. You then score how much each process impacts each customer need. It becomes crystal clear where you should be putting your resources to have the biggest impact. So, we've organized our ideas, we've analyzed all the relationships. Now it's time to get down to business with our final module, Planning for Success. These are the tools that help you build a really solid plan, figure out the risks, and manage a project all the way to the finish line. First is something called the Process Decision Program Chart, or PDP. The easiest way to think about this is like a pre-mortem for your project. It's a risk management tool you use to systematically figure out what could go wrong at every single step of your plan. It's absolutely essential for any kind of high-stakes launch because it forces you to come up with backup plans before things go sideways. It's the definition of being proactive. You actually start with a tree diagram of your plan. Then, for each of the smallest tasks at the very end of the branches, your team brainstorms everything that could possibly go wrong. You filter out the really unlikely stuff, and for the big, significant risks that are left, you develop specific countermeasures. This way, you have a real contingency plan ready to go, not just a plan for when everything goes perfectly. Now, the prioritization matrix. This is probably one of the most powerful and yet simplest tools for getting everyone on the same page. You sit down with your key stakeholders before the project even starts, and you force a decision across the three classic constraints: scope, time, and cost. So maybe they decide the deadline is absolutely fixed, so time is constrained. They're willing to cut features to hit that date, so scope is accepted as flexible. And they want the best possible result within those rules, so cost or resources is what they want to enhance. I'm telling you, this one simple conversation can prevent months of arguments down the road. And last but not least, the activity network diagram. This is your classic project management tool for visualizing a really complex schedule. It maps out all the tasks, it shows you which ones have to be done before others can start, and it helps you figure out the project timeline. The most important thing this diagram does is reveal the project's critical path. Just look at this example. The critical path is the longest chain of dependent tasks. It's what determines the absolute minimum time your project will take. Here, task C can happen whenever, but task D can't start until B is done, and B can't start until A is done. So the path A to B to D is our critical path, at 12 days. And that is so important to know, because any delay, any delay, to a task on that path will directly delay the entire project's finish date. So there you have it. We've walked through all 7 tools, but it's really important to see them not as 7 separate random things, but as one cohesive toolkit. It's a complete framework for thinking that moves you logically from a chaotic mess of ideas all the way to a well-managed project plan. Let's put it all together one last time. You start with an affinity diagram to sort that initial brainstorm. You use a tree diagram to break down the key themes into more detail. The interrelationship diagram helps you find the real root causes in that mess. Then you use the matrix diagram and prioritization matrix to make smart choices and get everyone aligned. Before you hit go, the PDPC helps you get ahead of any risks. And finally, the activity network diagram keeps the whole project on track. It's a perfect flow from chaos to execution. So the next time you're staring at a wall of sticky notes or you're facing one of those big, hairy problems with no clear answer, you don't have to guess. You've got a system. You have a toolkit. The only question left is, which one are you going to reach for first?